Yeah, okay. I can do that. So, yeah, my name is James Hofmann. Age is 34 years old. And regarding games, my interest is as a developer. I'm interested in, I guess, both technical and design aspects. I've been working on independent games for a while, and more recently working on what I call a game engine, fantasy console type of game engine called Galapagos. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of like what I'm doing.
Yeah. So I think like, and please don't have me pigeonhole you or steer you towards talking about this too much or making too much of this. Just really, I think the main thing I took away from our emailing was, I'm just going to quote you back to you if that's okay, as you said that, quote, my entire career...
I've forgotten.
That's why I take notes, and that's why we do it over email. Well, no, you had said that just like basically, quote, my entire career has been one of having the question, so what do you do? And side note, sorry to ask you that up top myself. You said that has just become an increasingly difficult thing to answer. And you said that having a project is hard to talk about is very much in keeping with that tradition. And I guess I was just curious, like, has this been your experience exclusively with games? Just your sort of... Because I just feel like that's the thing that people often take for granted around games is just having a thing that they know how to talk about that they're doing. And I feel like I never hear people talk about, like, how sometimes that can be a struggle, not to put it too strongly. But it can be either an uncomfortable thing or just a feeling of like, well, people, the person I'm talking to just doesn't understand like what I'm interested in, why.
Yeah. So I think a large part of it is that there are definitely different mindsets that get into games for different reasons, and so you develop a kind of defensiveness around the question of what do you do, which is couched in terms of like, this is the current thing I'm doing, and this is the only thing I'm doing because otherwise I might not get a job because I'm not passionate enough. And so, like, when you take that as a starting point, then it becomes very difficult to have that kind of more open-ended conversation. The what do you do question just kind of leads you towards, well, okay, I'm doing something you can understand, and here's that thing.
So where do you feel like, I mean, maybe we should back up. I mean, you talked a little bit about what this thing is that you're building, but like, is that a thing that you still feel like you persistently lose people in conversations? Like, I'm surprised to hear that like it's wrapped up in like passion, because I would think like someone working on a thing that isn't immediately understandable, at least to me, it would feel like a thing that's like, I don't want to put it in a hierarchy of passion, but it's like, oh, they're working on something really interesting because like I don't even understand what it is.
But that's like that's reducing it to one topic, like conversation piece,
right?
And that works in the same way that it works to like be up with pop culture and say, oh, how about that new show? It's like you have something to present, and yeah. So going back to the what do you do question, it really is a question of like, show me what you've got, right? And that's not a question of like, oh, I want to like go into like asking questions that be answered right now. It's just like a more, how do you say, like a mechanical, like power struggle type of way of thinking about how I should talk to people. Yeah, I kind of lost what else I could. I was like, what do you do? I guess if I wanted to answer the question honestly,
Yeah.
Like I'd like to just be somebody, exploring stuff. And the stuff doesn't have to be games necessarily, although I am drawn towards them.
Mm-hmm.
But more like, this is kind of a like doing some kind of research, I guess. It's like there's definitely things that haven't been talked about that I would like to appreciate. And I guess one way of appreciating them is by just kind of directly grappling with the problem and, doing the technical work. And that's kind of what I'm focused on currently.
Yeah.
But let me. What comes to mind is so I've been taking every semester I'll take a class at the local city college, and I'm doing that kind of as a way to expand my sense of what's possible. And I always bring that back to what I'm doing in games because they're very flexible in that sense. They're you can do a lot with the medium. But I also see that as okay, actually, if games are just the medium, then it's not that there's an absolute goal that I'm striving for within them. It's just that I'm using them as a kind of way of summarizing, I guess.
Yeah.
And condensing the things that I'm doing. It's I can apply all of this now to this one specific medium.
Well, and this may not be, maybe it would be worth backing up and talking even a little bit more, about what Galapagos is and what led you to start embarking on a thing that...
I'm sorry, I lost you.
Are you still there?
I'm hearing you now.
Oh, okay. I was just saying maybe it would make sense to sort of back up, because we've been emailing a little bit about this, and I know a little bit about it, and I know you're still working on it and still figuring it out yourself, but this may not be the way you think of it, and I'm certainly not going to come back in 5 years and ask did you accomplish it? But do you have a goal with your engine, or is there some sort of hope you have, or broader reason why you want it out in the world and other people working with it?
Yeah. Okay. That's a good thing to think about. In terms of broader reasons, I think it's I had a whole bunch of inspirations that I'm I want to do more with this or that. And, but at the same time, I wasn't I just want to directly engage with that inspiration. I want to take it and remix it into something else. So in the emails, I was I talked about Ming Mecha, which was the analog modular visualizer, and it looks like it produces something game-like, but it's doing something where I'm I want to engage with games more in that kind of shape, and I want to find ways to play with those ideas, which is very different from treating games as a product a thing that I like, that I just take an idea and I communicate the idea in a way that can be marketed. And so like the way I have to go about like engaging with all of my inspirations is kind of like find a project to work on that can let me at least touch on them, which leads me in this very like abstract, like I don't know exactly what I'm going to work on next direction. And I think a lot of people approach this in terms of like, oh, I'm going to work on like 100 different projects at once. But I'm more of I want to have one project that summarizes everything. And that's actually, it's easier to approach that in terms of that'll make some kind of tool that will let me like play with the thing that I want to touch on very briefly, because then like I don't have to commit to any one specific instance of that idea. When you make a game that's going to be sold, you have to commit to a production. And the production is like a lot of that's just figuring out the one specific way to do things that will be the best way forward in terms of like time and energy and like communicating what you're trying to do. And the production can be interesting, but it's also not it's not talking about the idea so much as it is the process, I guess. The idea can be very, very simple.
I mean, it's interesting because I'm trying to remember. I mean, we talked about having this question in common of, I mean, it's interesting to me, the idea of like, rather than work on, 3 or 4, maybe even more, I think you said like 100, 100 disparate projects. Why not try to work on one that is all encompassing? And I had mentioned to you that a question that I sometimes ask in these conversations is just simply, asking people who make games when they're finished with one, like why go and make another one? And you said that you ask people this question fairly often, and my sense sometimes is that some of the people I ask that question to, like I don't think they really understand that. On a certain level, I am asking about like why go through just the, why put yourself through however long it will take, whatever sacrifices you have to make. Like part of the question I'm also asking them too is like, why make a book, or excuse me, why make a game instead of like try to write a book next or try to do a painting or a sculpture. I mean, I would just be a little interested to hear like how you started asking people that question, and whether you said like, do they understand it better in your circles than in mine?
So I would say that actually, no, the question isn't understood very well by most people because this was back in 2015.
Okay.
I think. And it was a conference. It was Indicate. And I decided, this is very big on my mind for whatever reason. I wasn't sure why I was making games. I was like, I'm going to go around for the entire duration and just ask people, why are you making games? And I got a lot of answers that were very, how do you say it? Just kind of pragmatic in that they were like, well, I guess this is just what I'm doing. Or I just like them. And not, they didn't have, any principled answer, I have a very specific thing that I need to tell the world, and games are the way to do it. I never got any answer remotely resembling that.
Yeah.
But what I did get, and this was by chance, one of the talks, they had a clip from the film Style Wars, which is about graffiti artists in New York in the early 80s. And in this clip, it's like the teenage kid who's been doing graffiti, and he's at home, and his mom's like, I don't understand why he goes out and does this. I don't think it's safe. I don't think it's a good idea. And the kid's protesting. He's like, no, I'm doing this for me, Mom. And it's very heartfelt, that scene, that he's definitely getting something out of doing this activity, even though, it's looked down upon by society, and there are all these reasons not to do it. There's very little, economic reason to do it. But he's very engaged with the idea that, this is a way to, build my identity, to say that, I'm a person. I put up that piece on the wall, and they can see, I was there. And I think a lot of people who create things have that driving them, even if it isn't, in the front of their mind. I would say that, there is some of that kind of the ego drive, even though I'm trying to decenter it from myself kind of proactively and find some reason why I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing.
I mean, Yeah, I mean, I feel like, and it sounds like it's a judgmental question on the face of it if you were to just see it in print, but, I think about, how many years have you been working on this engine now?
This one, in terms of active work on it, only a year and a half at most. But I've been thinking about it and trying different things for the past decade, and it's kind of developed into being something that I can understand and talk about coherently.
I mean, I was just going to say that, so I've been working on, this interview series or whatever you want to call it for a little over 5 years now, and I think it's at that point where the same thing could be asked of me, and I feel like the answer would just be, oh, well, I'm really curious. That would be the main personal statement. And there are ways that I think of it and ways I want to approach it where others can take whatever they want from it. But I feel like I don't know, because again, like I said, it's not intended as an accusatory question. It's more, it would be a subset of that where I'm just curious, and it seems like for all the time that people spend making games, it's surprising to me that if they're younger, if they're students, for example, in game design programs, maybe the most articulate they'll be is they'll say, oh, well, games are cool. And they think it's it's a good way of getting around a quote unquote real job. But I
there's definitely a cycle.
Yeah, go ahead. I just feel like I rarely hear people talk about this
students.
What's that? Yeah, why they do this
I'm
exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's just well, what is this thing that's in, what's the fuel in the engine that keeps people going? Obviously, you make a lot of money, you'll keep going, but the majority of people don't make a lot of money doing this. And it's just I always find it interesting, how rarely that's discussed.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, and I knew this all the way back when I was young and still in college or just out of college, that there was stuff that wasn't right about how the image of games was formed, and game development specifically was formed in these students. And at the same time, I was also kind of bought into it. I was I'm going to be some kind of industry professional. I'll just be ahead of the game and figure it all out and right off into the sunset. I think that there's an element of that where like the story just kind of ends after they get their industry job to all of these students.
Yeah.
Because they fulfilled their dream. They are making games and doing it for a living. And so a lot of them do that. And then like 4 years later, 5 years later, they're like, I'm kind of burnt out. Why was I doing this again? And so like there's that very high turnover rate that you see.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that comes from that dream is fulfilled, and then they have no further ambitions in games. So they move on.
You mean like they move on to other industries, or?
Yeah. If they can do it, they move on. Some people do get stuck, and they feel burnt out, but they also feel like they don't have like a different career path that they could be developing. Like I definitely know people who are like that.
Yeah. Well, especially like I don't want to get too far afield here, but you're in like the Bay Area, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've always heard that like people who leave game industry jobs when they go to like broader tech, out in your neck of the woods, they learn that like tech companies, this is a lot of broad statements, that like tech companies look down on game companies insofar as like they think that like they aren't learning like the cleanest ways to code, or they don't have like rigorous work ethics. And I guess like a lot of this is like weird ripples of something from a while ago. And I guess like as far as just like the way things crystallize, as far as like the way people think and talk about games and where lines of communication cross and don't cross. I don't know if that's making sense with, go ahead.
So what I would say in regards to like tech looking down on games, it's very strange in a sense, because people who are like genuinely deeply interested in technology and like good programming practices and all of those kinds of details, they're like, there are really good game coders out there. They understand like all this sophisticated stuff about essentially like low-level optimization and making the game run fast and consistently and doing a lot of game content in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And so those people understand like the priorities. They understand that there's a difference in like the kind of technical domain, because there are definitely different domains of programming.
Sure.
But from an economic standpoint, if you look at the history of like which countries develop game industries, what you tend to see is like people turn to game jobs. Good programmers turn to game jobs when they can't find work elsewhere.
Yeah. So you're saying there's a history of that worldwide? It's not just our tech hub in the US?
It's not local. It's like you look at a lot of Europe, like Eastern European countries, like they have these very very good, inexpensive labor forces for games, essentially.
Right.
And so, like Russia in the 2000s, I think was like that. And I think Brazil's kind of like that now, although Brazil's more complex. So, like, every country's more complex than what I'm saying. But, like, there's definitely an element of, like, that you're taking this job because you couldn't get the prestigious job at, like, a bank or like, I don't know, Salesforce or whatever company is like a major brand name.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, you need to get the job at Facebook or Google or whatever, and then you're set, right? Like that's the best possible position you could be in terms of like being a software developer. Is like you're looking at this giant corporation that makes a ton of money, and you have a secure position. yeah, the very like career mindset kind of thing.
So, I mean, I wonder to bring it back a little bit more to what you're doing, like, because I think what I really identified and was interested in hearing about was just like a little bit of your journey to just realizing, like, oh, I'm building an engine, like that's the thing I'm doing, like,
Yes.
so like that's what you call it, but like, I wonder if this kind of, maybe, I'm sure there's a number of factors, but it never occurred to me that like this sort of this cloudiness of understanding what's driving, one in and around games. Like, I wonder if there's a connection between like the lesser status that games even seem to have, or like they don't seem to have this real estate just to even like I wonder if like you could have figured it out faster in a way if games weren't seen as lesser than tech in some way, just because you could have had more conversations with more people.
Yeah. So I would definitely say that in terms of the conversations I've had and I'm having now, things have changed a lot. When I started, the only kinds of conversations I could have were they were very oriented around like the studio processes that were known at the time, around 2010. And everything was kind of like, it was angled around a specific way of doing things, a specific kinds of products, very rigid categories.
Yeah.
And we definitely had like an opening up of different kinds of conversations. Like the way we talk about what kinds of people work in games. It's no longer just like studio developers and then publishers. You have all these other stakeholders. You have independents, you have people developing middleware, you have people doing production services, you have people in academia. Journalists have a voice now too. I mean, you're doing a thing right now.
Oh.
And that's all changed in like a pretty short time frame.
Yeah, 10 years in the scheme of things isn't that long. Although it can feel like an eternity if you're trying to just figure out like why am I attracted to doing this thing, and what is this thing, and how do I just get people to understand?
Yeah.
Like, I wonder, like you mentioned media, for example, like I wonder, like, was there some sort of like catalyst that made having more meaningful conversations easier for you? Like we were talking, you were mentioning, I guess, like more infrastructure changes with just like more outposts of conversation, but was there something that happened maybe that sort of greased it a bit more?
Well, I mean, in terms of like trying to analyze it, like they tend to say like you can usually look at changes in like big changes in systems like this is like either if there's a top down direction, like a shift in power, or there's like some kind of bottom up, like there's some kind of new freedom enabled. And you can say there's some of both in like the changes we've seen, in that we have tech companies that have this kind of top-down power, but at the same time they're also enabling this bottom up through social media, and you can put stuff on the App Store or pretty much wherever you want, and you get your message out in some form and publish it, and try to make yourself like a voice on your own. We've had kind of a phase change in terms of like how easy it is to at least conceive of doing that. Because you look at like back in 2000 even, and like the infrastructure to do a call like the one we're having right now wasn't nearly as good. We could do it over the phone, and like you would have to like have a tape recorder nearby. Maybe you could have done it with some of the online stuff that was available, but we would probably be on dial-up. And so not everyone you want to talk to would be able to do it.
Right.
And so you'd have that kind of friction, right? And like the friction's gone. Everybody has a smartphone if they want a smartphone. And like it's little things like that, but like I think there's like, you know, inflection points that suddenly you have the leverage to do things, and so everybody does it. Like Kickstarter, like suddenly everybody could launch a project. So we have this wave of everybody trying to launch projects and do a Kickstarter. And of course the enthusiasm cooled off, and now it's more of a steady state. But you know, there's always something new coming up.
Right.
That now we have people doing Patreons. That you know, like yeah, it's something that comes to mind is that I tend to tell myself like the world changes on like cycles of 4 years, because you'll see new generations of technology, a new president. You'll have kind of minor in a sense, but also like they change the character of things, and you can see it happening, you know, roughly every 4 years, at least recently.
Yeah.
But things change in a pretty substantial way. The kind of conversations you have are different.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I mean, I mentioned I've been doing this for a little over 5 years now, and I don't know if I could tell you what really changed. I mean, I could speculate, but like I feel like, you know, I felt a lack of like certain types of conversations happening out in the open and across whatever aisles and between different disciplines, and I mean, whatever. I built this thing, and it's an excuse for me to have conversations about the things that I'm curious about. I don't know that I could really pinpoint like what changed where I feel like it's gotten easier. You know, of course, I'm participating in changing the outcome because, you know, you do a thing for a while, people learn about it or know about it. You don't have to do as much explaining about what it is you're after, but you know, like I did a thing that was a reaction, and so I just like, it would seem to me you're building an engine, and it seems to me like that's in a way also trying to be a catalyst, or you're trying to, I don't know, like you were reacting to like maybe like a lack of something out there as far as the type of game, and then you want to exact some kind of change. So just curious, like what those are, or if you even 100% know.
So something I think I might have mentioned in the email is like kind of like the specific catalyst for like I was going to like go and build a specific thing, and that would actually be my project, and not just like a kind of side endeavor that I would kind of dream about. And that was like I was it was during EDC in 2017 or something, and people were talking about game labor and like that. Yeah, we should do something. We should have all these you know, various idealistic principles, and we were having conversations about that. And I think that got my head pointed in the direction of, well, okay, if we're having conversations about it, you can have a thing in the shape of a game engine that actually tries to address some of these issues. And like that wasn't a totally coherently formed thought right when I had it at that instant, but I was definitely like, I could just do it. I could just make the thing. And so I was like, okay, I'll set down some principles and just try to go at it. And like that works in a sense, because most of what you do with technology is kind of built on the philosophical underpinnings of like here's why you're building this complicated system that processes information. And like a lot of technology is built under the model of like over 100 years ago when IBM was formed, and like you were taking census data and trying to categorize people. But that isn't the only way in which you could model the world, right? You don't have to model the world as like individual people with name and age and gender and skin color and so on. Like those are very arbitrary properties, but we're picking them because they're legible to us. And I think that's the thing that I was actually writing about earlier today, was legibility. There are a lot of things in the world that like they aren't legible. They're like, oh, I don't understand this, and our approach to them tends to be to make them legible by turning them into a caricature of like what they are. It's like, oh, I can't draw like a dog very accurately, so I'll draw this icon of a dog, and everybody can recognize the icon of the dog. But like that, it isn't the same as the actual living thing, you know, that's like panting and like pawing at you and stuff. And so like every time we do things with computers, we're kind of doing that kind of like, oh, I'm just making this imagery, this iconography. And so like if you just approach the computer with a different set of principles in mind, then you get like a different result. It's just going to happen.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I mean, like, I really hate to use the word goal because those things maybe can only be discerned in hindsight after what you've done has been out there for a while and you see how people react and what they actually do. But, I mean, are you hoping to sort of propagate the game soil, if you will, with different types of games or different types of people around games, both, either, neither?
Yeah, I am. And like, I don't see it as like world domination in the sense of like, oh, I want to remake the whole world of gaming in my image.
No.
Whereas like,
right. Yeah, no.
It's more like I just want to have like alternative options, like because so many of the tools we have are just built in this model of making things that it's specialized around industrialization.
Yeah.
And like not every artist is working in an industrial model. Like that's actually unusual in a lot of the arts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've talked with people around games where they would even take issue with being, lumped in with the arts. And it always feels like as soon as you bring the A word into it, like it's like, well, why model yourself after the art world when the art world can't even decide itself what is art? I mean, I think those are all helpful questions, and I just feel like, I mean, I guess I would just be curious, like, just to continue your thought, because I do agree with you, and I don't want it to sound like we're saying one is better over the other, but I wonder in what ways, the prevailing engines and the prevailing hardware, like, limits our ability to be more open-minded or even to throw out, more ladders to people just to understand different ways to approach games. Because I think it's revelatory for people, for example, to say that, like, if you're making a game on a certain system, like let's say PlayStation, okay? Like the actual way the system is built and the way the controller functions it makes like 95% of the decisions for you about like what you can actually wind up building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here's an interesting distinction that comes to mind. Lately, I've actually been interested in pinball, like traditional, like mechanical, electromechanical pinball machines.
Sure.
And there's this very strange dividing line between video games people and pinball people.
Yes.
Like the two do not, they do not really mix.
When Jim put us together, I was just going to say, like, that was actually that was a literal through line. I was trying to figure out and talk to people who were there about where were points of bleed through from pinball culture, words you never hear, into video game culture. And the universal answer I heard from people who were there, in the 60s and 70s, and certainly goes further back, before then, they were very skeptical. They were like, well, there was no bleed through. And it's like, are you sure? I don't know. That's also your sense of it, is there's some sort of line in the sand.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why that is, because it all... Anyway, go ahead. I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I've been trying to research this question a little bit, as well as just being interested in the game. And my sense of it, from what I'm reading, is that first of all, there was some direct influence from video games into pinball.
Yeah.
In that. You had, in the 80s, like all of the solid-state games came in, and they were trying to be like video games, and like they actually poached people from Atari. I think it's the Williams group.
For sure.
They like literally just said, "Oh, we're going to hire people from Atari and get them to design some games," and they did that, and the games became more like video games in certain ways. But like the thing that divides the two, I think, is that there is a lack of legibility in pinball because it's a game that's so premised on physics. And if you look at what video games are, like they're very digital. Everything can be reduced to like binary state, timers, numeric resources, like quantitative, like lists of items that you collect. And so having the system where you're like, you don't know exactly where the ball is going to land, but you just shove the machine a little bit this way and it'll go where you want it to go. That's actually scary to a video games person because they want to know and control everything.
Right.
So that's my take on it, at least, is that it's not that they don't intermingle, it's that the perspective on, like, what is this game and why are we playing it is there's some fundamental differences of opinion.
Why? Yeah, I think that connects with, for example, trying to build. I don't know, like trying to build a new engine, for example. I'm thinking back on like interviews I've done in the past where, with people in their early teens, and I think because I'm just thinking of like ways that genres of video games have formalized and sort of become calcified. And if you, I know because I have done this in the past, like when I've asked 12 or 13-year-olds, I ask them like, oh, how many genres of video games do you think there are? And certainly they're younger, they're not as exposed to as many games, but they would say with great confidence, like, oh, 2 or 3, which I think is like much lower than what people around our age or older might say, which is like maybe they can rattle off 5 to 7, and then there's like 1 or 2 they feel like maybe they haven't seen in 20 years, although with things like Kickstarter, for example, there's certainly been a revival of other forms, but I I don't really know if the question is about like why have those calcified. I wonder if the question is more like why have these genres calcified so much that. I mean, I don't know. Like everything I've heard about just like building an engine is you're just basically on the hook for tons more work, and people don't want to elect to do more work than is necessary.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely so a lot of what people want to think about when they first start making games, and not necessarily down the line if they really get into it.
Yeah.
Is just like, I want to make a game that's like this other game, but it has different graphics.
Mm-hmm.
Few things that are very near and dear to my heart, like some kind of self-indulgent fantasy goes into it, because like the game's already selling you a fantasy, probably.
Yeah.
So it's just like, why not have more of that? And like that's the mindset I think people have most of the time when they're getting into games is like, oh, I just want, essentially make a fan fiction.
Yeah.
And so like that leads to the model of like, okay, so I just want to do it in this form, and I'll use this kind of engine for it. And it's not actually important what the gameplay really is,
right?
Like on any concrete level. It's just this is a framework for putting my specific content that I'm envisioning into a video game form. And I think that's actually reasonable, like, because that's kind of like, it's kind of ritualizing, I guess. It's like, oh, I want to make dance steps, and like dance steps can be very specific. You can have styles, and you can say, I just want to have this kind of dance, and dance to this music in this specific way. Like you can definitely apply this kind of like, I just want to do it in a formulaic way to like whatever idea I have in mind. And where things get weird is just like when you're trying to envision something that's like, I want to change the user interface to my game, like that I'm going to not have a controller. I'm going to have voice recognition, and things like, oh, I'm not going to have a traditional like progression of like your story is like something about a hero character and they gain power and such. I'm going to do a different kind of progression. Like those are things that are interesting and different. And then they also mean that the engine has to change on some fundamental level because it's going to need a different kind of technology. In the same way that to do a really different kind of dance, you would need to develop technical skills to execute it.
Well, you had said that marketing is actually a big fulcrum in impacting the entrenched ways people have of thinking. I would love to hear you talk about that, and I'm also trying to. I think I have a much more abstract version of what you're saying in my head. I guess I'm curious if you can drill down a bit.
Yeah, so marketing, I tend to think about marketing a lot, even though, like, I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily any good at it. It's more like marketing is something that's very poorly understood by a lot of new game developers.
Yeah.
So I end up having to explain it to them because they'll tend to make the common mistake of like, oh, marketing is just promotion. You send out a lot of spam emails saying play my game, and they aren't thinking in terms of like, why do you think anyone cares about the experience that you've just produced, and to make them care, like you have to get into like actually giving them some kind of story about why is this the thing you would be interested in doing right now with your time versus all of these other things? And that's like a very difficult question to answer because it's very meaningful. Like it's like, okay, show me that this experience on the screen is different from the millions of other screen experiences.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's really hard.
I think that's true, and I think that's a really compassionate way of putting it. Is it's the obvious question, but it's the hard question. And I oftentimes will have developer friends refer, people they bumped into on Twitter or wherever, or people that they know who are like they're working on their first game, and they get introduced to me over email, and they want to know, like, I think in all honesty, like, they want to know, like, well, what are the, I hate to put it in terms of games, but like, what are like the quote unquote cheat codes to like getting people to care about this thing that I've made. And I don't think it's a game specific thing. I think it's a human general thing where it's like, I oftentimes, I'm at a loss for words. I'm not really sure how to advise them, and I don't know. I mean, and I wonder, maybe you're annoyed if I keep tying this back to engines, like all this stuff like that has like jumbled our brains and made us think this is the way to think about things. Because obviously there's more than 7 or 9 types of games, right?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of types of games.
Yeah, I mean, we like to put things into buckets, but it's harder to put it into that bucket of why should people care? And you said that, like, I mean, I would argue this is maybe like younger people's responsibility, this attitude of like, I don't know and I don't care, as you put it, when it comes to solving these kinds of problems, if they're even problems. But like, I don't know. I think that like what really interests me about you and what you're doing is like we should challenge the easy assumptions that we make, I think, in all arenas of creativity. And I don't know if this is a thing that's maybe changed in the last 4 or 5 years or not. I mean, we've never obviously talked before, so you may have a different sense of it. I don't even know that I have a sense of it. Is like, are people hungrier to poke at this stuff in games? Because I think that you said that, like, I don't know. I mean, that's my sense. Is like you had talked about this. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So my take on it is probably they are. Yeah. And I'm kind of just expressing the zeitgeist, as it were.
Yeah.
And like right. It's a thing that's kind of gradually crept up on us.
Yeah.
About the traditional technical hype cycle.
So
you still had. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm interested. I mean, I don't want to cut you off. We're talking about marketing. We're talking about these other things. I mean, I'm ostensibly a media person. I'm always wondering, like, what more can media do to also be a catalyst in encouraging us? Like I don't know whether it's wise or not to be like ignore the state of media and how difficult it is to spotlight different ideas. Like I don't know. Like, what do you feel like there's a real lack of that would like help put a pillar up under, for lack of a better way of putting it, getting more people eager to poke?
No, it's like there's definitely a sense of like, okay, we're done with the cycle that we've had since probably the 70s of just like we'll put more computing power in things and stuff will happen. And so, like when you reach an end point to that, then you're like, okay, well now I have to question everything again. And like maybe you'll grumble for a while that like this is difficult and like it was simpler to just like keep driving forwards and forwards and forwards. But like if you hit the end of the road on like this way of thinking about the world, and I do feel like that's been the case.
Yeah.
Then yeah, you're going to want to try to do something different.
Different from what? I mean, is there a...
Oh,
Because I know what you mean.
yeah.
I always wonder when two people bump together and we start talking in this shorthand, we may be agreeing, but I don't know what we're at. Like, what are we glossing over?
Let's try to get into this. So I mentioned, like, I feel like the trend's been since the 70s. And that's kind of a general, like, okay, well, what happened in the 70s? Everybody talks about, like, around 1970, the U.S. changed in some fundamental way. It's like, we got this phase of, like, increased inequality, and the approach to politics changed. And it's just been this constant trend. It's like, we're getting higher housing prices. The trends keep going the same way. Actually, one thing that doesn't follow that model is crime, because crime kept going up and then it went down.
Yeah.
But I guess crime's doing something different. I'd have to think about that. But there's just, there are so many trends that started around that time frame that I've definitely read different analysis, like tackling different pieces of the puzzle, but not something trying to put it all together into terms of like, okay, so is there like some like overarching philosophy behind all of this? And I would say that a lot of it is tied to technology and like information technology specifically, that we put more computing power and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we may be wrapping around to something you had said earlier, which is just industrialization.
So I think, what happened in the 70s, you started having a computer industry. Well, you had computers before that, but they were more like a tool of corporations more generally. That they were like designed for specific processing needs, or like science, military apps, and then you got this moment where other things were possible, and you had a computer on every desktop, and I think that was like a big fundamental shift in that we can have an industry where everybody's working with software on this individualized level. And so you had a lot of visions from that period that were like, everybody's going to be a programmer. And it didn't quite work out like that. You had a lot of software consumers, as it were, and then an industry that's developing things for them. And I think games followed the same path in that, you look at the earliest microcomputers, and you had the hobbyist clubs, and you have these magazines that are like, type in your own games. Anybody could do it. And that all went away within 6 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Forever after, people have been like, that was some really interesting stuff back in the day. I learned so much from it. Programming games on my Commodore 64 got me into this computer business. but we haven't gotten off the model of like, oh, that you have like consumers and developers. And the only thing that I think has changed to make us question that is that we're kind of running out of things to be sold. So now developers have to compete on quality. Just getting on whatever the newest technology is and making the first version that they can market, which is, you look at a lot of new applications and it's following this model of like, oh, we have to control the market and be like the one platform everyone uses. So, we have to be the world's dominant social network. We have to be the best word processor. We have to be the most used operating system. There's all of this platform talk that always happens on the development end of things. And you look at games and it's like, oh yeah, Fortnite has to be the world's number one game. And it's doing it by like providing as many different aspects of the consumer experience as it can possibly handle. And like the mindset is very like that you have to have an audience that's willing to participate in passive consumption. And I don't think that's quite where we are anymore. I think that part has changed. And it's just because we've run out of things to that we could possibly say are better. We can say like it's higher fidelity now, but like how much higher fidelity do you need?
Yeah, and I can't remember if we're in conspicuous consumption or post-conspicuous consumption. Like the buying things just to for status. Yeah. I mean, I wonder to like, because I feel like we're connecting a couple dots that we laid out earlier, and I wonder if like. Is there some sort of boomerang effect here? Like you were talking about like legibility and just putting people into categories. Like, is there some sort of, I don't know, boomerang or ripple effect where people when they're making games are like, they don't even know why they're doing it? Because I feel like if you look over at like, people who want to be rock stars, however shallow their goals may be, they know how to talk about it.
Yeah. So yeah, regarding legibility, what comes to mind is like, I remember some years back, like some business article, and it was like the trend of the 21st century is customization. And it's like, okay, yeah, customization, right? That sounds good. Everybody wants to customize. But if you customize deeply enough, then you no longer have a category, really. You just have you have something that isn't legible anymore. And I think that's kind of a tension that's emerged. That you can't just keep breaking it down into like, oh, I can keep configuring it. This is a problem that's actually dealt with in the software industry. It's like the idea that you can reuse code and make it modular. And like this sounds like a nice principle to have, that reuse software, then you don't have to develop it twice. But if you make it configurable enough, then in the end you're still doing programming, and with different tools than what you started with that are not necessarily any better.
Right.
So yeah, there's like this. How do you resolve that? How do you square that circle?
Well, also, I mean, better is a subjective thing. I mean, people. It can be as arbitrary or granular, and I'm not making fun of it. It would be like, people are only interested in like what can render the widest variety of blues, for example. You know what I mean? Like, like I think I don't know. It's interesting. Like this is there's like a weird tension here, and I think what really just struck me about since we were put in touch is like I don't think I've heard anybody really talk about this. So I don't know if it's like just happening behind closed doors, or if this is just a thing that people don't even realize that they can want.
Yeah, like I do think people want it as soon as they're aware of it.
Yeah.
And there's a question of education here. Actually, that's something that came to mind when I said like marketing is important. Yeah. And like you think about, well, why is it that all these new developers are like, I don't understand marketing? And then it goes back to their education was lacking in some way, probably. And you look at how are they educated today, and it's like, oh, they're being trained to produce the content, but they aren't asking artistic questions. They aren't asking like, well, what's the meaning? Why is this meaningful? And so they don't know the meaning, and so they go out into the world and they're like, well, I don't know why it's meaningful. Just buy it, right? Buy my game.
That is what it feels like, oftentimes. Which is like very easy to laugh at, right? But like, I haven't solved that problem. No one asked me to, but I recognize it's out there, and I don't know, because I don't even think if it's not a one size fits all solution there either, but there is a noticeable lack of it, and I think that's what I find concerning is too strong, but it's like it feels very blatant,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, blatant in what sense do you mean?
It's very noticeable. I mean, the way I have described it, I think you're putting it like a description under a thing that I've felt an umbrella term for. And the way that I've talked about it recently with, colleagues who write about games, colleagues who make games, and this is like somebody on the East Coast of the U.S. in the last week or two, and also somebody in Australia in the last week or two. And so I know this is not just me, but like I've talked about it as like, it feels like the channels are narrowing as far as the ways that people think they can talk about games and the way they want to talk about games. I think that connects with what you were saying. I mean, maybe it is a marketing thing because they have the example out in the world,
Yeah, like I do think that people need examples to learn from.
Yeah.
And, it's hard to get that when, you don't know what's out there, right? Like, that you don't know you can just find what you need. Like, you don't have the tools, the mindset, the muscle memory, whatever it is, that just says, oh, yeah, you can go and you can go and make the connection you need to make by doing this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I got a bit abstract there, but let's see if we can bring it back. So, yeah, the marketing question. That you need to be educated in a way that gives you a sense of my identity isn't just that I make games as in game product. I have this notion of people aren't just making games, they are making products. And that implies all these other things that aren't necessarily about games.
Right.
And I think like that distinction needs to be brought up in the education and from fairly early on, so that people have a sense of like, okay, do I actually want to be part of the game industry in the sense of like I'm just making products? And people do enjoy that. They're like I would look at a lot of people doing AAA games who have been in console games for many years.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I just like making entertaining things that a lot of people can enjoy. But I don't think that's most of the people entering the industry and what they think they want. I think they have like all these other notions, and they haven't been given any tools to really express that. So when you say like the channels are narrowing, I think it's like there's like we had a moment earlier in the decade, or in the past decade, I guess.
I know what you mean.
Where the channels were opening up and like there are opportunities and I think in practice, like again, most people weren't prepared to actually use those opportunities, and the people who were, generally like they were. I wouldn't say they were like necessarily like people who had good ideas or things to say. They just recognized the opportunity and jumped out in front of it.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was a easier way of communicating these things to people who, I mean, maybe it is just going back to educational things, but I feel like in the past, when I've given talks to classrooms, and in the undergrad and also graduate, and even things that I've taught, it's like they're more pragmatic. They want to learn, how do I build a portfolio so I can get a job, and then those are many of them will be people who 10 years, 5 years, 15 years, like they will be wondering these kinds of things. I wish there was a way that this sort of stuff could get in front of and heated by people like that, rather than the tried and the tried and true path of you just spend a long time learning the way you don't want things to be. Because I think ultimately it benefits the ecosystem, of games overall, but it obviously none of this stuff is in a vacuum. It feels at cross purposes of, I don't know. That's maybe it is marketing, maybe it is education, maybe it's not solely one thing. But I just wish there was a way. But I think that's, again, like I said, like with like the game soil, I think things like what you're doing and what you're trying to do, it's important in that regard, because it puts it out there for people to just realize. Yeah.
So something that kind of a topic jump here, but what comes to mind is so last semester I've been taking these classes once a semester, and I took a class on storytelling and performance, and this seems like such a odd thing to focus on, like just storytelling and not like specifically creative writing or specifically like producing some kind of medium, right?
Yeah.
And the class was very like, one half of it was traditional storytelling. We wrote a little short story and read it to our class, and we essentially performed it with voice and gesture. And then the other half was producing it as a play, and like they had it set up so we performed at the like junior museum for little kids. And so like what I noticed in doing that was how little production you really need to get your story across. And when I say marketing is important, I think in terms of like what that class showed me was that you can write a fairly compact story that has thematic elements. It has some characters and plot, but it doesn't have to be elaborate in the way that we look at so much of our pop culture. It doesn't have to be, this giant universe. It doesn't have to be this serialized prestige story. It doesn't have to be, the endless content updates that you expect out of your games. And it's interesting that we've ended up here. So yeah, when I say that marketing's important, I think it's also like you can tell a smaller story, right? You don't have to a very big production to get the point across.
Yeah.
But I think people get scared at that notion because, again, there's an identity thing here. Like that you're building your identity off of like, oh, I'm making this big game thing. I'm a game developer. And like a young person's going to say, yeah, that's my identity, game developer. But to finish a small story and say, this is my identity, that's actually very difficult. It's much more difficult than saying I'm just going to throw myself into this technical work and say like it's so complicated you'll never understand it. Because if you actually told the story, then you'd have to say something people understand.
Right. In a naked, vulnerable, clear, and concise way.
Yeah. Like the escapism that tends to be part of playing games is something that's absorbed by people who make games, and that's been true for a long time. And so, like, they don't want to confront their identity. They just want to somehow make a thing that says nothing and also be very popular.
That's very true. Because I used to like to try to get people who work in AAA, I think around the edges of this. Like I would try to ask them, and this is another thing that there's been a marked change in the last 4 or 5 years is just more people who operate in that part of the ecosystem, like being willing to sort of go off script a bit. But I would try to get them talking about like what question does this AAA game story ask? And oftentimes it feels like I will ask a question like that, and I'm not knocking, that portion of the ecosystem or industry, but it often feels like I'll ask a question like that, which I feel like is plain English, and it sometimes feels like I just cast a magic spell and we're in a different planet, and it's like they don't understand what I mean at all. But I feel like you articulated it much better than I did, which is just to somehow make a thing that says nothing and have it be very popular. So thank you for that chuckle, at least, if nothing else. Well, I think I just have one more question for you, is there something else you wanted to bring up that you didn't get a chance to?
Oh, I think I've been able to roam around like what I've been thinking pretty well. So
good.
We can finish up.
Okay. So I mean, you were talking a little bit about like smaller, clearer, more concrete, ideas around story, and so this is going to be a lurch into much more abstract, big picture, probably not even answerable terrain. But what do you feel that video games have accomplished?
Okay. So I think the number one thing they've accomplished is this kind of extension of what play is or could be. I saw just this past holiday, like I was visiting my brother and he has young kids and they were playing, and like the niece was like just getting into Lego and still trying to grasp what these pieces are and how they fit together. And like when I kind of extrapolate that in terms of like what we're doing with games now on, the cutting edge or whatever you want to call it, it's kind of like, yeah, we've put play in a lot of places where it just wasn't considered before. It wasn't part of the conversation that we could make a game out of it. And I think that's important, culturally as a society that we're able to think about these questions in different ways than we used to, and that also that more people are exposed to them, because a lot of the kind of overarching questions of the world used to be very secluded and cloistered. They were something that monks did, that academics did, or nobility did, and it, like when you play a game, you can put yourself into those scenarios that they would face in some degree, and get a sense of like how is life lived by other people. And just find all these different perspectives on things. I think that's really what I'd say. That's the main accomplishment here. It's like, we can see other things that we couldn't before.